This revenue sharing era is officially upon us. The House settlement approved by Judge Claudia Wilkin a few days ago. Schools can officially directly pay players. There is a clearinghouse for outside NIL deals to be vetted as fair market value. What that means, I don't know. There's questions all over the place, which is why we call people smarter than us. And that would be Adam Sparks of Knox News, has been all over this stuff. Not just from a national perspective, but obviously on how the University of Tennessee will be handling it as well. Adam, appreciate you as always joining us in a time where talking about college football in the offseason very rarely actually means talking about football.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the setup makes sense because I call people smarter than me. I feel like this is getting dumbed down each layer we go through on this.
This is not a good example of the transitive property, but we'll just plow right through it. So
yeah, let's give it a shot.
Everybody knows this figure by now, right? Around that $20 million mark. I've heard $22 million, $20.5 million, but either way, that's what schools have if they opt in to directly pay players. I guess just right off the bat, Adam, what do Tennessee fans specifically need to know about how the University of Tennessee is handling this particular matter?
Yeah, I mean, the money that in some ways this is simpler, in some ways it's more complicated. The money that Tennessee players are going to be paid is going to come from two sources now. It's going to come from the traditional NIL, if that's even a thing, where, it's a collective and fans are donating to it, boosters are donating to it, businesses are putting into it to get players to do commercials for them. That's traditional NIL. That's how players have been paid the last 3 or 4 years. That's going to continue, but that will now seem more like a bonus on top of sort of their regular pay. Players' regular pay, so to speak, will come from revenue sharing, which is just directly from the school. So if not every player is going to get paid revenue, just like not every player is going to be paid NIL. I mean, most athletes in like non-revenue sports don't get any of that. But if we're talking like football, basketball players especially, the better players or the more valuable players will get a check of revenue directly from the school. It comes right out of the athletic department budget. And they will get that, and then they can get on top of that NIL money in the way that they were getting it before. The idea is that, there is a cap on the revenue, but you're going to go beyond that if you're any school that can afford that, and Tennessee is one of those. So, yeah, the $21 million cap for all athletes, that's not really, even though it's a cap, it's not really the ceiling. It's more of the floor for SEC schools. You will pay up to that cap from the school, and then you will top it off on top of that with NIL money. So, like Tennessee football, they're going to spend about 75% of the revenue on football players. Tennessee is, and so you're talking about $14-15 million, but the actual number that they're going to get paid is in the 20 millions because you're going to have more NIL money on top of that.
Adam Sparks with us at Adam Sparks on Twitter has gone into detail on this on Knox News with the article, House Settlement Approves Revenue Sharing. Here's how Tennessee will pay players. So the next part of that, Adam, is this clearinghouse, right, to determine what is fair market value and just how NIL will be regulated, because suddenly that's now how schools can, I guess it was always how schools can gain an advantage. But my point is the advantage is still there, right? That's how they can separate with everybody having the same pool of money to pay players with. How does that even work, and why should fans care about a certain group called Deloitte?
Yeah, so Deloitte they're going to be running the clearinghouse. I'm skeptical if it's going to work because I feel like it could be vulnerable for lawsuits. The way that you're supposed to do is any NIL deal over $600, which are most NIL deals, you have to turn it into the clearinghouse. It's not going to be run by the NCAA. It's going to be run by the College Sports Commission, which is a new entity in college sports. If you get an NIL deal, you have to turn in that contract and all that stuff to the NIL clearinghouse. They'll look at it and determine if it's quote unquote legitimate or not. Now, if that were to work, I think most fans would like that, because what they're trying to determine is if the player is actually doing work or doing a promotion, a commercial, if they're on a billboard, that sort of thing. If they're doing like that actual work and appearances and getting paid fair market value for it. That's the way that NIL was always supposed to be. That a football player goes and does a commercial for the local car dealership and they get paid, $20,000 or something. You're on a billboard for a siding company and you get $10,000 for it. And that's the way it was supposed to be. That's what the NIL clearinghouse is supposed to weed through and approve, rather than, the way the NIL has ended up being is that, you go and recruit or sign a quarterback and you give them $2 million. And maybe they have to do 2 Instagram posts or something, but they really don't have to do much of anything. This is supposed to keep that from happening. It's just, it's hard to vet that because, in any transaction, there is a buyer and a seller. And if the seller if they both agree on a price and what they're doing or not doing, it's sort of hard for a third party to jump in and say, well, that's not fair. And I think that's where the lawsuits are going to come in.
Yeah, that's the thing, Adam. I don't even know how you begin to draw that line. Are there contracts now that players will be held to from revenue sharing? That so that we at least know there will be penalties for something. Like Arkansas now is pursuing. Oh, what's the figure? I don't even know. $100,000, $200,000 that they paid to Madden Iamaleava, Nico's younger brother, who went to join him at UCLA. So players can be held more firmly to those deals now with revenue sharing. Well,
so you have to separate these. The third party NIL, the NIL that the Iamaleavas had, and all this NIL stuff that's been the last few years. Those contracts have always been around, and you kind of have to decide whether or not you want to sue for breach of contract or whatever. Most collectives or schools try not to do that. You can sort of be stained if you go after money in that way. The revenue sharing, now the revenue that's direct school to player, that's the new thing. There will be contracts in that. Before the House settlement even happened, there were preliminary contracts that were signed. UT didn't do that. They waited till the settlement went through because, you want it to be official. They'll sign contracts for revenue. Let's say a quarterback signs for a revenue share and he gets $500,000 from the school. That's his revenue share for the year. And then he gets another, let's say, $1 million in NIL. Now, those are two separate things. He's making $1.5 million, but the $500,000, the $500,000 is coming directly from the school in revenue. He'll sign a contract for that. If he were to go in the transfer portal in December, if the revenue was for the full year, then you can charge him a buyout to buy out the contract because he didn't stay the full year. It really depends on the terms of the revenue. But yeah, that's going to be a real thing. Now, some players will have multi-year deals in the revenue, 2-year, 3-year deals. It's just that's going to be very rare. And from the people that I talk around about to the SEC, I've asked the question, why not sign everybody to multi-year deals? That way you can keep them. They're not going to go in the transfer portal. The thing is, if you're not a star player, if you're not like a top 3 or 4 player on a team, the schools actually want the ability to opt out of you. They don't want to tie up a, average player or a player that haven't proven themselves. They don't want to tie themselves to a player like that for 3 years. And so there's always this idea that you want to keep the player, but sometimes the coach or the school is not really sure of a player and they want to be able to cut them loose too. So it kind of goes both ways.
Adam Sparks is our guest of Knox News on 104.5 The Zone. And you've written about this as well on Knox News. How does Zakai Ziegler and his situation fit into all this as he pursues a 5th year?
Yeah, he's trying to get that extra year. The idea is that once the House settlement went through, the rule would be changed or certainly challenged to where the 5-year clock, it's always been that that athletes have 4 seasons. They have 5 years, and they get 4 seasons in those 5 years. Of course, the additional year is a red shirt. But if you use your 4 seasons in 4 years, you're done. Well, Zakai Ziggler didn't take a red shirt. He used all 4 seasons in 4 years. He wants that 5th year, and probably if he were around next year, it would probably be a done deal, because I think the rule's going to change. He's basically suing to say, if the rule is going to change anyway, let's say in the next month, I should get the same benefit even though I played this past season. And so he's suing for that. I think we could get a ruling on that this week. Could even happen today. But the latest tactic of his attorneys is to use a new state law that UT used. That was pretty big in the news a couple weeks ago, using a new state law that basically says if you don't want to follow NCAA rules in the state of Tennessee, you don't have to. That the NCAA doesn't have authority over Tennessee athletes and schools. Now, most of that was meant for liability issues if there were lawsuits in this House settlement. But Ziegler's attorneys have said, well, no, it applies to every athlete in the state of Tennessee. And so the NCAA does not have the authority to enforce its eligibility rules in the state of Tennessee. They're trying that. I don't know if it's going to be successful or not. The House settlement probably weakens Ziegler's claim on that because in the House settlement, there's a clause in the House settlement that gives the NCAA and the College Sports Commission the right to uphold its 4 seasons or 5-year eligibility rules. And the SEC approved that. SEC went in on that. They approved that settlement, and therefore UT approved that settlement. So the school that Ziegler's trying to play for has already agreed to the eligibility terms. It's sort of a twisted web, that's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Twisted web. It's just everything right now, Adam. So, let's simplify things and maybe talk a little bit about actual football. In terms of just approval rating right now with Josh Heupel, who is added to his staff, by the way, NFL coach Marion Hobby coming on and kind of a quality control role in Tennessee going into 2025, trying to figure out what their quarterback situation is going to be. I've described it as almost this gap year. It feels almost similar to what the Vols had with Joe Milton the year after Hendon Hooker, that 2023 season. Is that a fair description to you?
Boy, if you say gap year or rebuilding year or anything like that around the Tennessee facility, you may get run out of the building. Yeah. Because they don't see it that way. Now, coaches are always that way, of course. But I think the idea in the transfer portal, NIL, now rev share era is that there shouldn't be a gap year or rebuilding year just because you should be able to reload. And, of course, if Nico was still here, we probably wouldn't see it that way as much. But because of that whole weird situation, it's definitely a year where, if you talk to people around the conference and you say UT, what you just laid out is sort of how everybody around the conference sees it. They'll be competitive, they'll be fine, they'll win some games, probably be like an 8-4 type team. They'll win the games they're supposed to, they'll lose the other games, and they'll be sort of a middle of the pack SEC team. That's sort of the thinking around the conference. Now, if you look closer at their schedule, they could be not good enough to win 9 or 10 games, but still win 9 or 10 because their schedule has quite a bit of weak points to it. So we'll see. But obviously a lot of this depends on whether or not they can make the quarterback position work. But there's so many things beyond that as well.
What else to you looms largest for Tennessee football this offseason? Like understanding that Joey Aguilar is on campus and he's getting his feet under him, and that'll be a battle in training camp. Is there anything that we're not talking about with this team this offseason?
Yeah, I think we've almost forgotten about injuries. Miles Kitzelman, we think, could be back at the beginning of the season. They've got to have him at tight end. They've got to have him for whoever the quarterback is as sort of a reliable safety valve. You definitely need him at full strength by the time the Georgia game comes around in week 3. Jermod McCoy is even bigger than that. That's a guy that tore his ACL, All-American cornerback, tore his ACL in January. Like, could he be back at close enough to 80, 90% in the Georgia game to make a difference, or is this going to be a longer-term injury? I mean, ACL, that's tough to come back from, but they're pretty optimistic. And then a whole lot of other injuries that really didn't get that many headlines back in the spring. I mean, Arion Carter was out. Multiple linebackers were out. The defensive line was really thin. A lot of those were injuries they knew would happen. There were cleanup surgeries in the offseason. But, in the spring, that team was not ready to compete. They have to get a lot of guys back and make up for lost time in fall camp to be where they need to be. And that's especially, I would say, on defense. There were just so many injuries, so many cleanup surgeries in the offseason on defense that they have to get those guys back and at 100% because offense is a huge question mark. Tennessee's defense cannot be a question mark. It has to be somewhere between solid and strong, which it was strong last year, which is why they got to the playoff. It's got to be close to that again with as many questions they have on offense.
Adam Sparks with us. Marion Hobby joins the Tennessee staff as a defensive analyst. I mean, longtime NFL defensive line coach, former defensive coordinator for Clemson in some of their peak years. What did you make of this move by Josh Heupel and what is, I guess, one of the deepest sort of quality control networks in the SEC? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, this has sort of changed in the last couple of years because the analyst job changed, I want to say a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, to where, the way you had to do it before is analysts were kind of what they sound like. They were a little behind-the-scenes guys, but the rule on analysts changed a season or two ago to where those guys can now be on the field, working with players one-on-one or with a group or whatever. They're just additional assistant coaches is all they are. They're just lesser paid assistant coaches. So, instead of just having like Rodney Garner, the defensive line coach out there, you can now have Rodney Garner plus like 3 other guys. And you can even see it sometimes in drills where instead of, Rodney Garner with 15 guys, you've got 4 coaches with, 3 or 4 apiece. And Marion Hobby obviously is a great addition to that.
Adam Sparks of Knox News, everything you need for the current state of college athletics, a tangled web indeed. At Adam Sparks on Twitter, of course, everything happening with Tennessee football as well. Adam, thanks so much for the time, man. Always appreciate it.
Yep, good to be on. We'll see y'all.
All right, Adam Sparks with us on 104.5 The Zone. And if you missed any of that, you can catch it, of course, on the podcast, The Buck Rising Show, today with no Buck Rising, fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken, the best in the world. You can also watch it on demand on the 104.5 The Zone YouTube page. Be sure to like and subscribe while you are